I've already talked about how brilliant and amazing Welt Sustain is, how it can give you the power of E2 Acheron for free, and just how much more damage it will give to the team. Let's talk about how to actually build Welt now. Unlike regular sustains, Welt is so much harder to build because it heavily depends on how much damage your DPS does, how much leeway your Welt needs to give, and how willing you are to restarting the entire run. The essence of how to build Welt relies on one thing: how many times he needs to ult throughout a run. In some cases, throughout an entire MLC 12 run, you only need to ult once. In such scenarios, you don't need an energy recharge rope on Welt, do you? In other cases, you need to ult 3 to 4 times, in which case you very much need an energy recharge rope. I will go through examples, but only you and your account knows how many times Welt needs to ult to keep you alive and complete a run. There are 3 ways to build him: pure support, hybrid, and pure DPS. Starting from pure DPS, this is where after you reach the recommended effect hit rate threshold, which is 50 to 67% effect hit rate for non-crowd control resistant enemies, and at minimum 100% effect hit rate for crowd control resistant enemies, you can run as much DPS stats as you like, really. Attack rope, 4-piece pioneer, or 4-piece imagery set. I'm running him on arena play now. As you only need to Welt ult once, you can forego much of everything else. While I would recommend having 134 speed at least, you might not even need that. This next build is a hybrid build, and a hybrid build is what I use because it works to be flexible. The goal is once again to reach the effect hit rate quota, but then you want a lot of speed, 140 to 160 speed to be exact, with the energy recharge rope, and everything after that is optional. Running a hybrid might mean you need multiple Welt ults to safely sustain, in which case let me give you some advice on some cool tech. First of all, I doubt your Welt will be faster than your Bronya or Sparkle, but if he is, you can ignore this part. Now remember what I said before: with Penacony or Von Wax set with an energy recharge rope or working tutorial passive, all it takes is one skill and one basic at the start of the run to get Welt's ult. Now assuming the enemy is 130 speed or slower, Welt's technique with Von Wax would hilariously be enough to delay the enemy to act twice before they act once. But the average speed of enemies in MLC 12 is 158. We cannot act twice before the enemy does, which usually leads people to believe that it cannot be done, and they tank all the damage done to you by the initial wave of enemies. Remember, in Welt Sustain, HP is a resource. If your HP drops low enough, moving on to the second wave leaves the ability to die by bad luck, and nobody likes that. Hence why, using Von Mack to have Welt act before your Sparkle and Bronya, you can then advance forward Welt before then using his basic to have his ult ready. Trust me, this is incredibly valuable on especially annoying enemies like the Monkey, which summons dogs that move incredibly fast and also speed up their allies on death. Doing this might mean going into the second wave without Welts already, so do be prepared to make use of other strategies like keeping the enemy alive to farm energy and skill points off. Many would argue this isn't worth it because you're losing out on doing damage by advance forwarding your Welt instead of your DPS, but many are wrong. Welt Sustain's firepower is second only to sustainless teams. Once maximized, the first cycle almost kills the enemy outright. The second cycle you can use to farm for skill points and energy. You see this a lot in my runs. With so much firepower, I don't need to maximize my damage. I'm already doing so much, it's a problem if I kill my enemies too fast. Now, the unique thing about a hybrid build is that you can adjust it to your liking. If you recognize that you do not need that much speed, you can reduce it and work for more crit stats and the like. Or vice versa. If you feel like you're willing to gamble the effective rate a bit, you can do that as well. You can run any weapon of your choosing so long as the effective rate quota is met and is very flexible. Relic-wise, you can run a rainbow set, meaning any relic, even if it is not on set, so long as it helps you reach the quotas. I personally use a mix of 2-piece speed and 2-piece imaginary, but many can do a lot better. For the planar set is between Penacony, Von Wack for the tech I mentioned earlier, and Keel. Again, depends on how badly you need Welt's ult and how your run goes. The final build is pure support and it works very simply. As much speed, energy recharge, and debuffs as possible. You do not bother to invest in damage in the slightest and use pure support sets like Von Wack, Penacony, Keel, and the like, while also using 4-piece Eagle set to make sure Welt gets as many actions as possible. While mostly the quota is the same, 50 to 67% effective rate for non-CC resistant enemies and the like, they also prioritize another stat if the enemy is weak to imaginary, that stat being break effect. Break effect increases how far back the enemy gets pushed when weakness broken, which means if the enemy is implanted by Silverwolf or you simply are just fighting imaginary enemies, you can see some extraordinary things like 200 action value delay, pushing the enemy back 2 to 3 cycles. On this build, you can run a dedicated effective rate weapon and debuff weapons like Pearls, Rain, and the like. Tutorial and sample LCs are especially good because they provide effective rate. You do not care about Welt's personal damage for a pure support build. Just to walk it through again, if you need Welt to ult a minimum amount of times, or you want Welt to do damage, you run his DPS build. If you want the flexibility of having Welt do damage while also being a reliable sustain character, you can run a hybrid build. If you want Welt to be as reliable as a sustain as you can get, you would run a pure support build. I'll put up Welt's energy list here, just so you are aware how many action it takes for Welt to ult depending on your build, and so you can plan accordingly. And one more nugget of advice. Multi-phase bosses need a Welt ult for every wave. Remember that. The good news is that bosses like Sid give Welt his ult back so he can make do with a pure DPS build like I've shown, but others like Swarm are not so kind. Please do keep this in mind.